Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Primates Discover Art. And I'm very excited about this one because I think art is one of these misunderstood or often misrepresented concepts in the evolution of humans and human civilization. And so it was one of my motivating factors in doing this lecture series was the central, what I think would be a misunderstanding, or at least the emphasis, I think, is somewhat wrong. So as when I discussed with tool use, we always emphasize the product, the technological revolution of a new kind of axe or a particular arrowhead or a sling or something like this, when probably much more important, and at least very important and much less discussed, is this notion of the social and communal elements that had to evolve at the same time to make those sorts of breakthroughs possible to be replicated, sustained, handed down, and improved over time. This took a whole superstructure of cultural practices and outlooks which built upon pre-existing primate social behaviors to allow for a tool that is discovered or invented, depending how you think about it, to propagate through time and space. And so without that cultural revolution, you do not have the tool use revolution. They have to come together. You can't separate them. Similarly is the evolution and development of art in the development of human civilization. So this is, it's controversial. When exactly does it start? There's evidence a long time ago, much like tool use, but what is without doubt, there is no question about 50,000 years ago during what's called the Upper Paleolithic Revolution or the Upper Paleolithic Explosion, is you get a very rapid development essentially of all the art forms within a relatively brief period of time. Again, if you think of tool use of having gone along at this point for several 100,000 years, and there being limited evidence of some potential art, some of it's controversial, but again, at some point after 100,000 years ago, but clearly 50-ish to 40,000 years ago, it's just everywhere. And it's all the art forms all at once, except perhaps movie making. They really hadn't mastered filmmaking yet, but that'll come in a little bit. So you have several 100,000 years of sufficiently complex cultural groups or social groups to create rudimentary tools and to pass them on, and for those to be sort of widespread in certain areas. Different tool sets were spread differently, of course, in different regions of the world. And then, again, you have this Upper Paleolithic explosion, which is one of the most controversial eras in archaeological history because no one knows exactly what happened. Lots of theories, very interesting, but we're not going to go into that today. But without doubt, this happened. And so all of a sudden, what you get is a dramatic increase in the size of communities, the diversity and sophistication of tools, and an absolute explosion in artistic expression. You get the full panoply of the art. You get bead making. Apparently, for some of the earliest surviving bodies that we were tattooed, so it looks like tattooing goes all the way back. You have painting, of course, cave painting, sculpting, carving, clay. You have ritual goods being placed in burial mounds. So all of this expression element of the human development comes into focus and explodes just rapidly and spreads everywhere. So that pretty much after that date, given the preservation, challenges of 50,000 years or 40,000 years of time, you just don't find anybody who doesn't have it. And so right near me, in France, you have the Lascaux Caves, and this is a phenomenally well-preserved and phenomenally powerful collection of cave paintings from between 15 and 20,000 years ago. Again, dates I don't think are that crucial, but what you do when you go into these caves, what you realize, one, is that it's a diverse set of techniques, skills, and materials that are used to create them. So you have color, form, texture. They use the caves. They do etchings. They do perspective. They do three-dimensional. It's like everything. they're immensely powerful to the point where every time I go, I come away thinking, we do different art. I'm just not sure we've done better art. We might even do art I like more, but there's no way I can actually say this is better, right? Like it's just, you just go, that's just very, very powerful and moving and well executed and just unbelievably just powerful, again, expression of the human imagination. And this is where I think we go a little bit wrong, again, as with tool use. When people talk about, arts education today or doing the arts or the importance of art and all this, it's always discussed as if it's this ancillary extra, that it's this special thing that a few people do or that some people have, or that, that if you're rich, you can spend your time, wasting your life with this kind of thing. All those sorts of comments and questions. If you look at school curriculum, particularly in the United States, they've been pulling arts education out. They've been de-emphasizing it because the notion is other things are more important. Other things are really valuable. But if you look from the inception of the Upper Paleolithic revolution, what you see is large human communities, sophisticated tool use, and artistic expression you can't unweave these. These are one thing. They are aspects of a single, or aspects of the interaction of several different developments that happened at one time or within a relatively short period of time, that then propagated across all of the cultures that were able to take these on. And so what this tells us is that you cannot have humans, you cannot have human expression, you can't have human communities without art. That it's a misnomer, right? It's like a wrong idea. The notion of being an educated human without art is just, it's not true. You would actually have to be something different than has ever existed in the past, and certainly a far cry from our heritage. And so what seems to have happened, again, this is hard to know, but part of what seems to have happened is the primate capacity, which I mentioned in the first lecture, to have some sense of the future and the past, because they have friend groups, they remember favors over time, they have a sense of territory, they have all these things that require them to have some sense of a past and some sense of a future that they understand and interpret in the present. And what seems to take place once you have both tool use and particularly art is the expression of a broader conception of the world, in which one realizes that it doesn't have to be this way. At which point the imagination, the capacity to imagine the world to be different in some way, to say, I saw a horse in a field, that rock wall does not have a horse on it, but it could have a horse on it, because I could put a horse there. I can alter my world to express something that I feel about the world, and that other people will be able to look at that and experience that, and it will be meaningful in some way. So this is a phenomenal leap in sophistication and in the application of the imagination. And some sort of anthropologists, social scientists who ponder this think that it is possible. Again, no one really knows, but there's some that argue that, look, the big breakthrough for humans that make it so powerful for survival and then multiplication and all this was the imagination, that this was the single great thing, because we could start imagining the world differently, or we could start running sort of scenarios in our minds and go, well, if we do this, that's the likely outcome. If we do that, that's the likely outcome. If we do that, that's the likely outcome. And that imagination sort of gives you a chance to run practice runs. And then you go, oh, I think that seems like that's probably the better way to go. And so that it might have been an outgrowth of this sort of capacity to ponder different variations of the world and choose the one that you think would have the best outcome, because we imagine that way, that may have been the key that allowed us to really begin to develop and increase the size of our communities and increase the sophistication of our tool use, so on and so forth. So for instance, like if you could look at the Lascaux cave paintings, they had to collect a lot of materials to make the paint that they used in the caves. And some of this seems to have been relatively rare in the environment. Of course, it's hard to tell exactly from 20,000 years ago, et cetera, but that seems to be the line. But this underscores the notion of early men out there in the wild going, oh, those berries I could grind up, dry, and store because next year we want to do some more of those cool cave paintings, and those are the berries that give us that color that we need. And so, always in these early documentaries and stuff, they talk about survival and hunting and eating, which is all good, but they tend to really de-emphasize the notion that all of those skills are built around a kind of cultural mind and an imagination that also says, hey, those berries, don't eat them, grind them. They make really good red. They make the kind of color we like to use for horses. That mud over there, that's perfect to prepare a wall for. Let's carry some of that back with us, and we'll store it until we're ready to go. And that sort of reimagining of the world and seeing resources not as survival or not as a given, but as materials that can be transformed, can be transformed, stored, and then used to express the imagination. There are cave paintings or wall paintings that exist in Australia, that exist in France, that exist all over the world. One of the things that anthropologists have pointed out is a lot of them aren't of animals that were hunted. Sometimes they are, often they are, but not always. And sometimes they just seem to be imaginative creatures, right? These are coming from dreams or coming from visions or coming from someplace else. And so that, again, that capacity to imagine the world as being different, as bringing the new, as rearranging the resources that are presented to me in a different way, and that way is not for hunting, that way is not for quote-unquote survival, but for expression and for some sort of cultural communication. Exactly what it is, nobody knows, because it's hard for us to project ourselves back in time and know what exactly they were trying to communicate. But they were communicating something to their people and to themselves. And it's one that's like music. It's powerful, but we don't know exactly why, right? You just stand there and you're like, oh my God, I'm moved. I don't know if I'm moved in the way they wanted me to be moved, but yet here I am moved after 20,000 years, which also, by the way, suggests that we are very much like them. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't resonate with people so strongly. So that social evolution of really expanding the capacity to imagine a world as being fundamentally alterable, as resources being rearrangeable for the expression of abstraction, right? Think of it as, the development of abstract thought, of abstract presentation, as, we talk about it as, oh, it looks like a horse, it's representational, but what a leap that is, because it doesn't look anything like a horse actually. You're not going to mistake it for an actual horse in spirit. What you're going to do is go, oh, I know that somehow this person has captured those elements of a horse that let me think horse, which is an extraordinary leap, right? This is an imagination that's just booming now. Now we're going, and so much of what happens in art relies on that seemingly simple yet incredibly powerful capacity to associate line, form, color, tone, texture with different objects, bigger things in the world, things that you've experienced. And then, of course, it's a very tiny leap once you get there to then go, oh, I can express things that have never existed in the world. I can express things that are not, right? Counterfactual things. And so, but notice this, different from abstraction, tends to be the idea of expressing things that that have no representational power. But when you think about drawing or painting or carving something that doesn't exist and yet is still representational, again, the sophistication is just unbelievable, right? It's like it's so full blown, and it's there right at the inception. And it's clearly necessarily there to allow all, it's all woven into the fabric of the communities that were able to do the massive improvement in tools and sophistication and start having growing larger societies as you blow out communication and you blow out your ability to more subtly articulate ideas and concepts. And then you get so if you think about something like the creation of beads as an extension of social grooming, right? Of going, oh, I can now pass on to you material objects which you can store. And now we can both recognize that this is a gift I've given you because it's materially manifest. And I had to make it myself. And by the way, one of the things that the people who make these early beads and stuff, because they try to figure out what was going on, so trying to reproduce them is one of the ways of getting a better sense of what our early ancestors were up to, is, it's really time-consuming and difficult. Right? Some of this beadwork and some of these, basket weavings that don't survive as well, but come along later and probably were around for a very long time indeed. They were just impressively difficult and time-consuming. And so when you gave someone a gift of beads or you gave someone something that you had carved from stone or from ivory, I mean, it was this extension of this underlying primate capacity to remember the past and express our social connections into the future. And that, wow, here we go. And, you can just see the evolution of gifting culture and, quote unquote, the development of economies and all this is now we're off and rolling. Why? Because of this capacity that art expresses and embodies and reinforces, and that is necessary for everything else to exist. And I'm always fascinated by this because, you hear these arguments about, why do we need to study fiction? Why do we need to study art? Art's not a big thing, right? All this kind of things. And the one I always come back to is I'm going, okay, our money is fiat. It's backed by a story, right? Like we make little pieces of paper with art on it, and then we tell a story about it, and that is the foundation of the global economy. That's spectacular. I mean, wow. And then people go, well, art is not that important. I'm like, what? You have no idea what you're talking about. These sorts of capacities are so foundational to human society that I'm always, I vacillate between being wildly vexed and being finding it just unbelievably hilarious that people who get out of cars that were designed and engineered and the evolution of art and aesthetics into buildings that are designed and built by architects and lit by people and sit on furniture that's designed and talk about, economics that's founded on a beautifully printed pieces of paper with a nice story behind it. And they go, well, I don't know about this art stuff. And you're like, yeah, that's because you're completely divorced from reality and some sort of idiot savant when you don't recognize this as a foundational nature of human society. However, another aspect of this that I think is important to consider, at least that I find interesting as this evolves through time, is early societies, what you see is almost an immediate attempt to control the expression of art. So if you go back to the Egyptians, for instance, there are some of their painting styles and some of the furniture. And furniture is very rare in the ancient world, but they made a few different kinds of chairs and things were stable for millennia in ancient Egypt, this unbelievable rigorous stability of the form. And what this tells you is there was an attempt, at least somewhat successful, to control the expression of the artistic inclination that is native in all human beings, right? Because you can't be a human without these capacities. We know this because it's just everywhere in the Upper Paleolithic. You don't find the Upper Paleolithic societies without the full panoply of these expressions. And that's even imagining what has not survived over time. So, for instance, everyone talks about the Lascaux cave painting as being rare. And I always wonder if it's just only rare because that's just what survived, rather than maybe they had just painted everything else in the world and that they were down to, oh, let's go paint in the caves because we've got graffiti on everything else in the natural world. Like maybe if we had traveled back in time, we would discover that they had completely defaced the natural world with paint. Like they just loved painting everything. Like when they discovered that Greek statues weren't white, but had in fact been painted, which we still struggle with. We'd still kind of deny that. But anyway, I digress a bit. But yeah, this notion that it's a rare or exceptional or ancillary or, bonus thing that, oh, you can enjoy art later, or, we've got to do the real work and all this, is simply absurd. And if you watch people, if you watch humans, like the love of makeup, for instance, humans love makeup. Love makeup. It's a huge, just massive industry everywhere in the world. It has all kinds of different expressions. And it's just one of the things we just seem to love above all other things. I mean, we just think makeup, haircuts, beard grooming, lipstick, eyeshadow, whatever it is, we're for it. And this is just ubiquitous, and it has nothing to do with survival, right? This is not a survival mechanism. It just seems to be built in as a social, communal undertaking of expression and artistic evolution that expresses our fundamental desire to be in and communicate with our primate tribal members. It's just right there, totally deep. And then when you get societies like ancient Egypt or totalitarian societies and throughout history, the countervailing force is like, oh, we want to control the expression of art. We want to control the way it's used. And so you get all through ancient codes and ancient practices, all the way up to the modern age, all these attempts to say, no, women can't wear red lipstick. Men can't cut their hair that way. You can't wear clothes that look like that. You can't have this kind of jewelry. You can't, like the bizarre and unendingly complex attempts to regulate the way people express themselves aesthetically throughout world history as far back basically as we can track is just mind-blowing. It never stops. And the reason it's always there is, I think, in large part because it's just innate. People want to try these expressions. They want to use their imaginations. They want to see the world not as it is, but as it might be. And if you're a totalitarian regime or trying to control people, the last thing you want them to do is imagine the world not as it is, but as it might be. You want to, in fact, defeat their capacity to imagine the world other than it is. Because then you might start thinking like, oh, hey, it could be more beautiful. Our streets don't have to look like this. We don't have to all wear the same hat. We could, maybe we could paint our lips red, or we could wear bigger jewelry, or, or get rid of the leader. Like that's always the biggest fear. But that imaginative capacity to express oneself in artistic means of all kinds. And again, like I said, Upper Paleolithic expression, you just get everything. You get painting and sculpting and bead making and jewelry and tattooing and carving and clay and just basket weave, everything. It's like whoosh. You get just the full panoply of arts that were available with the technology wherever it exists. And you just go, wow, we really, really, really love to do this. We love to make things. We love to look at things. We love to trade things. We love to imagine the world not as it is, as it might be. We love to gather resources and recreate them in ways that please us, in ways that entertain us, in ways that communicate something about us and about our community, about our understanding of the world. And that innate power is inextricably linked. You just never find the large-scale society, sophisticated tool use without it. It just doesn't occur. And so we know these are necessarily linked together. And it's also very clear that when societies historically have tried to clamp down and really to destroy these capacities or these expressions, those societies tend to atrophy pretty quickly. It's why when you look at the list of banned books in history, they're almost all fiction. You would think they would ban, books like How to Assassinate Your Totalitarian Leader. Though they don't ban that book. I mean, they ban that book. But they like to ban things like Harry Potter or, these sorts of books of the imagination. Because it's the imagination you fear. It's the imagination you want to control. Because it's the imagination that has the power. And so we simultaneously forget this and think that it's not important, that it's ancillary, But then if you look structurally at regulations and codes and rules and social norms all over the world, what you see is this constant pressure, constant battle, constant debates, constant development and expression, this just seething turmoil all around this necessary fundamental human capacity. And so once the primates get art, once they have this ability and they look around, they go, wow, I can alter, I can communicate, I can express, I can cross time, I can cross space, I can paint a horse in a cave now that someone that comes back next year will know what I was painting. So, I mean, there's so many layers there that we just take for granted, that we just think, oh, sure, that's just how the world, we're just used to it. But it's not normal. I mean, for hundreds of thousands of years of hominid evolution, this doesn't seem to exist. And then when we get a few early signs of this, it's many hundreds of thousands of years after tool use has developed. But it doesn't really take off. And again, we don't know what happened or what, probably, again, in a related series of events happened and that allowed this explosion to take place. But once it gets going, it just keeps going. And so today, when we look around our world and when we reflect on it, I think it's important to remember and to ponder like, oh, we're living in an imagination. We're living in the product of the primate mind development that allowed our social sense of, again, the past and the present and the future, and the capacity to shape the world. And then perhaps the key breakthrough to imagine the world as being very different and as expressing more clearly my own ideas, my own desires, my own feelings or thoughts, and that I can make those manifest materially. I mean, wow, just, it's mind-blowing. Like, it's really just, it's just powerful to me. And then as we live in a built world, I mean, it's crazy to me how I don't know, again, just to repeat that, it's just crazy to me how much of our world is simply the product of human imagination. The way we build buildings, the way we design cars, the way we make a chair or record an album, or, just the sounds that we hear, for good or ill, but these are the products of the human imagination. We live in a world that was shaped by our understanding that it doesn't have to be this way. It could be different. We could make a roof a different way. We could build out of stone. We could build out of wood. We could build out of metal. We could make it slopey. We could make it curvy. We could make it big. We could, we just, all these ways. And we inhabit these narratives. We inhabit these visions. And then we just forget they're there. And we think, oh, that's just natural. But they aren't natural. We're living in this unbelievably sophisticated and dynamic echo of that early leap of imagination that led our ancestors to start going, yeah, I can paint these lines and other people will know it's a horse. I can do that. I can make these signs and symbols communicate. And then, of course, you get the whole question of abstraction, where some of these things do seem to be just abstract patterns. And so, last little rant probably is the attack that you often get on abstract art, like it's, decadent or it's not representational, or it's just, it's nonsense on about 100 levels, but the most, I would say, or potentially one of the most important levels is simply to recognize that art has always been abstract. Right? We've just carved patterns into bones. We like patterns. Right? Patterns are cool. We enjoy them. That's all you need to know. The abstract art is not new. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a sudden development. We've been doing abstract art from apparently the first minute that we started doing anything. And we've continued to do it up until today, and we will continue to do it for probably as long as humans are around. And yet somehow there's this always this sense that, like real art is representational. By the way, which completely misunderstands the nature of representality, which is, wow, what a swamp that is. Hello, Derrida, and many others. But also to misunderstand that we live in a constructed world of abstract design and forms that speak to us, influence us, shape our thinking, shape our lives without being representational in any way. Like they're just not representational, and yet there they are working for us 24 hours a day. And you go, why do people get all fussed about this notion of abstract art? When again, go to the Lascaux cave paintings, go to the early carvings, go to, the Egyptian. It's clear that some of this is representational. It's clear that some of it is symbolic, and it's clear that some of it just seems to be cool. Like it's just, they did it because they thought, man, that looks cool. That looks all right. We dig that, right? Look at those colors together. You get some forms, not so much in the Lascaux cave paintings, but other cave paintings near here, where you're thinking, I think Rothko could have done that because it's just this sort of color patterns. And we don't know, maybe some of it wore away. Maybe it was a test patch. Maybe they're just testing out the paint on that section of the wall. But, you stand there and you go, yeah, Rothko. This is Rothko's distant cousin over here. And then one day Rothko woke up and was like, I think I want to paint like my distant cousin did. He was doing this cool color patterns on walls and I'm digging it, right? And that capacity to even just take the pleasure in the expression, right? It doesn't have to be representational. The doing of it, the feeling of it, the leaving of it, the resonance of it across time pleases us. And so as we look back, as we see the primates developing this fundamental capacity, do not undercount or devalue, because I think we live in a society that's continually trying to devalue this, which again, like I said, is bizarre given how ubiquitous it is. But that ability to imagine and to make our imaginations present in the world, what a breakthrough, what a phenomenal development, and what a growth out of the pre-existing ingredients of our primate society. And that imaginative capacity is human. And you just can't really be human without nurturing that and developing that and having the opportunity to put that into effect. And so when we look around at our priorities and our world and the shaping of it, I sometimes think, like I said, we're trying to pretend like the tools can be used without the imagination. The humans can exist in the societies without the imagination. But what you get instantly when you get the sophisticated tool use is you get the art. And it may be the other way around. The art may have come before the sophisticated tool use. And so here at the birth of the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, which is basically the start of everything that we live in today, the primates discovered their imaginations and the ability to communicate with them and to express with them. And that transformative power is probably at least as great, and I would argue much greater than the development of any set of tools or any other set of capacities that has developed since our ancestors got together and started grooming themselves and pondering the future. So, Primates Discover Art, thank you very much.